Good morning and welcome to another episode of Home of the World's Worst Weather Live. My name is Ian Bailey. I'm a meteorologist and education specialist, and I'm part of a crew of 6 observers that live and work here on the top of Mount Washington, taking hourly weather observations, putting out forecast products, and doing research from the top of New England. So thank you for joining me for another Thursday edition of our broadcast. Today we're going to be taking a look at the forecast discussion for the next couple of days, as well as some of the current summit conditions. So let's go ahead and check out what's happening up here on top of the mountain right now. As you can see, things are actually very calm and very pleasant outside. We're actually enjoying a really nice day up here, and it has gotten quite warm. So our temperatures are up here at 51, almost 52 degrees. So this is by far the warmest that it's been so far this year, and some of the warmest temperatures we've seen in the last 8 months since we've been sitting in those winter-like conditions. And speaking of conditions that we're not used to, our wind speeds are incredibly low. They're down to about 2 miles per hour, and there were a couple of times yesterday where we dropped below 1 mile per hour for our wind speed. So this high pressure that's sitting over us has contributed to some very calm conditions, as well as some very clear conditions. So we can see about 90 miles away from the summit right now, which is pretty far. The maximum that we can see is 130 miles, so there's some haze on the horizon, which you'll see here in just a moment. But 90 is still pretty impressively far away, so we can see quite clear in these nice conditions up here. And then taking a look at the auto road vertical temperature profile, this comes from our Mesonet, the series of weather stations that go from the top of the mountain all the way back down to the base. You can see we have a very typical profile, which is completely above freezing. But as we're starting off to the base, where it is pretty warm down there, so they're up in the 70s at this point, and temperatures are decreasing as you get up and up and up on the mountain, all the way back down to where we're at around 50, which again is still impressively warm. So we are transitioning from those winter season conditions to those summer-like conditions for sure. So let's take a look at what's happening outside. So this is the camera in our weather tower that looks down across our observation deck, and you can see just how beautiful it is outside and how little snow there is by comparison. So the last time we were up here, we got a considerable amount of snow. And since then, with this high pressure that's moved in and these incredibly warm temperatures, a lot of that has melted off. You can see bare patches on a lot of the rocks down below, just off the observation deck there. Again, you can see some fairly clear skies. We got some cloud cover aloft and some haze on the horizon there. And if you're paying really close attention, you can see a couple of bugs that are flying past the monitor at this point. So the bugs are waking up, and when we have calm days like this, it's not uncommon for bugs to come up and be quite a nuisance up here. So not looking forward to having to deal with that when we get into the afternoon for my observations. But again, it's just a really impressively beautiful day outside, really calm and really warm. So nothing terribly exciting happening up here, so let's go ahead and talk about our forecast for the next couple of days and take a look at what's been going on. There's been some really interesting weather patterns that have been occurring leading up to this point, so we'll talk about that and why some areas are seeing very little rain and beautiful conditions, and some areas are experiencing some pretty historic and awful floods. So let's go ahead and start off by taking a look at our satellite feed. So again, we're looking at infrared satellite here. We're looking at well-developed cloud tops at this point. Let me go ahead and switch to the mid view so you can see a little bit better. So here we're looking with the brighter colors like the greens, the yellows, the oranges, and the reds. Those are really tall, cold, well-developed clouds. And then the areas where they're closer to the grays are very low-lying clouds, not well-developed, or maybe some clear conditions. So like we usually do, let's go ahead and identify some areas of high and low pressure. And to shake things up a little bit, we'll start off by identifying areas of high pressure, because we do have a couple of impressive areas of high pressure right now, one of which is directly over New England. So we'll start off here. You can even see the clockwise rotation around this system. And the clear conditions actually stretch all the way back over to here. So we have this elongated region of high pressure predominantly over the northern part and most of the Great Lakes. And then right underneath that, we switch to our low pressure. So there's not too many large areas of high pressure other than what's going on here. But we do have this low here, which, believe it or not, actually is the remnant effects of the Albert, I believe was the name of the storm, Tropical Depression Albert. And you can see it's still rotating moisture into the southeast part of the country here, into the mid-Atlantic, and this has been the predominant factor that's been causing all of the flooding conditions, just this continual rise of moisture up into the Great Lakes and into southern Michigan. So that's where a lot of that's coming from. We also have this big low pressure back here over Alberta, which is swinging down a lot of cloud and a lot of precipitation into the Pacific Northwest. And then we do, in fact, have a little weak region of low pressure down here in the southwest portion of the United States, which is helping to draw moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico up here into the south central plain. So these are the pressure systems that are at play currently, and you're about to see in a minute that this area of high pressure is actually something really special that has formed in the last couple of weeks and has been the major drive of weather patterns for the last week and a half or so. So let's go ahead and jump to our models here and talk about what's going on. So I know normally we start off at the surface and talk about the synoptic scale, things that are happening on the national level, but I decided today we're going to start in the upper parts of the atmosphere, all the way up to 250 millibars, to identify what's going on here and what's been the main driver for weather over the last week and a half. And what we are experiencing right now is what we call an omega block. So let me go ahead and identify exactly what I'm talking about here. So I'll go ahead and draw it on the map as best I can. So we have this massive ridge of high pressure that actually built between this low back here, which is still spinning up over the Pacific Northwest, and then when Albert formed here over the coast before it actually moved inward. So this created this massive, amplified ridge of high pressure, and when these occur, these omega blocks, which gets its name from the omega-like shape from the Greek letter of the Greek alphabet, this omega block can persist for quite a long time. On the shorter scale, upwards of a week, but sometimes it could last for several weeks at a time. So this has become stationary right over the eastern half of the plains in the mid-Atlantic and the Great Lakes, and has been driving high pressure into the region like we saw just on the satellite a moment ago. Now what has happened since then is that the remnants of Albert have moved onshore and actually have become trapped underneath this omega block, and it's been sitting here constantly rotating in moisture for the better part of the last week. And so the reason that they're seeing these historic floods and all of this precipitation coming is this cutoff low. This remnants of Albert just keep picking up all of this moisture and precipitating it over the mid-Atlantic and the Great Lakes. So we hope everybody who's dealing with these historic floods is being safe, and that everything is being done to help you guys. The good news is as we step forward in time, you see we are on the tail end of this omega block. Since this low has moved in and kind of disrupted the flow pattern all across the atmosphere, what has happened is the high pressure has actually started to slide off over the Atlantic, and it's leaving the ridge behind. And so what you'll see in a moment is this ridge will actually break down, this high pressure will move off, this low pressure will start to track away from the mid-Atlantic, and so you will get a break from the precipitation here in about a day and a half or so. So let's step forward in time and see what's going on. Now I have to turn my pen off. So into the afternoon, into the evening hours tonight, you can see immediately the ridge is already breaking down and starting to slide, following this high pressure out into the Atlantic. This cutoff low is breaking free, and you'll see as we step forward into the overnight hours into Friday morning, the low starts to track at least to the upper levels up here into New England. And so that pattern will continue all the way through Friday into Saturday. By the middle of the weekend, at this point, you can see the omega block, the ridge, is pretty much gone. And so things will start to go back to a normal progression. But when you do see these blocking patterns again, they're incredibly impressive just because of how long they can last. And you're already seeing the impacts of what happens depending on where you're situated underneath an omega block. You can have a long stretch of beautiful weather like we're having here in New England, or you can see some really awful flooding or continuously bad weather patterns for an extended period of time. So that's what's happening in the upper atmosphere. So let's jump back down to the surface, still on the synoptic scale, so you can see, okay, the omega block is breaking down. What is that going to mean for our pressure levels or pressure systems at the surface level, and what that means for precipitation? And so we have the big low pressure here up over Alberta. You'll see up here in the Pacific Northwest plenty of precipitation, whether that be rain or snow, depending on where you're located, for the next 48 hours or so as this low just continues to spin and rotate in moisture from the Pacific. Down here in the south central plains, again, we have this weak area of low pressure, which you'll see as it forms into a more organized system over the next couple of hours or so, pulling in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, which will contribute to showers and thunderstorms in the south central plains, some of which could be severe. So there are the possibility for some supercells or for some squall lines to form here in central Texas into south central Oklahoma. So be on the lookout for that as this moisture starts to organize headed into the afternoon and evening hours. And then over here in the mid-Atlantic, we still have the remnant effects of Albert, which hasn't really formed and moved off just yet, and so there's plenty of precipitation coming off the Atlantic. It's almost like a reverse low-level jet setup when you have the low rotating counterclockwise here and the high pressure rotating clockwise here, creating this channel for all of this moisture to flow off the Atlantic up here into the mid-Atlantic and Great Lakes. And so that is going to continue at least through the better parts of today into tomorrow. And then we've got our big high pressure that's sitting over us, which is driving the really clear and stable conditions we're seeing outside. So we'll go into the afternoon, evening hours tonight. Not really a whole lot has changed. The precipitation over here in the south central plains has organized a bit more. So again, you'll be watching for severe weather today. You're still getting plenty of rain in the mid-Atlantic and even southern parts of the Great Lakes, like Ohio and the southern parts of Indiana. So luckily, Michigan seems to be pretty much cut off from the moisture at this point, so hopefully things start to get better. And then continued high pressure headed into tomorrow morning. Now we know the omega block has broken down. The high pressure has swung way out here over the Atlantic. You can see now the moisture is starting to propagate further and further into the northeast. And you can see there's still plenty of moisture that's being pulled up by this low pressure here into the Central Plains, so probably another round of thunderstorms for the Central Plains. Still plenty of moisture for Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and along the coastline here. As we get into Friday evening, headed into the weekend, now you can see the low that was here, was remnant effects from the previous depression, has now reformed here over the coast of the Atlantic and will track up towards us throughout most of the weekend. So by Saturday morning, 8 a.m., we'll be watching to see this low pressure moving offshore. So down along the coast, in southern parts of New England, you'll be experiencing some rain showers, possibly some thunderstorms, and we'll watch as this low slides out over the Atlantic, following behind the block, following behind the pressure for the rest of the weekend. So that's what's going on in the big picture. Let's jump down to the mesoscale and see what's going on up here in New England, specifically. As you can see, not a whole lot in the way of precipitation. So here's this big blocking high pressure that's keeping all of the moisture down into the Ohio River Valley and the mid-Atlantic. And so what you're about to see as we step forward over the next 48 hours really isn't a whole lot. But as this high pressure moves off, all of this moisture will start to slowly move in and advance into New England. So let's start stepping through into Thursday afternoon. Really not a whole lot has changed just yet. Overnight hours headed into tomorrow morning by 8 a.m. Now you can see the high pressure's gone. Here comes that line of precipitation slowly advancing along with the low, which you'll see in just a moment. Headed into Friday afternoon and into the evening. You can even see it rotating as it progresses with this low up into the southern parts of New York and then along the coastline here. Evening hours on Friday headed into Saturday morning. There's the center of the low. We can see the precipitation rotating through and around. And what we'll be watching up here is to see whether or not this low tracks a little bit further inland. Maybe we'll get more than just increasing cloud cover. We might actually see some spouts of precipitation if it moves a bit further north. But as far as the models are concerned currently, it looks like it's just going to track to the south of us out over the Atlantic by the end of the forecast period. You can even see it tracks off here. The precipitation gets wrapped around and pulled behind it. And so for the most of the weekend, we might still be in the clear up here, while everywhere else southwest of us will be experiencing some type of shower, maybe even some thunderstorms with more organized precipitation going on. And then lastly, for our woods, let's take neck of the woods, we're going to take a look at what's going on with temperature and wind. And the short story for us is that there really isn't a whole lot going on. We're seeing some pretty moderate conditions with our wind speeds, even really calm right now, and moderate temperatures as well, with this blocking high just continuing to pull in pretty much the same temperatures they're experiencing throughout the entirety of the region. And that's really not going to change through the rest of today into the overnight hours tonight. Maybe a little bit warmer as some warmer temperatures come around the backside of the high as it moves off, headed into Friday morning. So we are expected to be in this kind of like upper 40s, low to mid 50s for at least the next 48 hours or so, especially with plenty of sunshine as well contributing to those increasing temperatures. Friday evening headed into Saturday. And one thing that is interesting to note, there was a low pressure that has moved well off to the northeast of us that is swinging a cold air boundary down around with it. And it has kind of been picked up by us, and we are going to watch to see if that boundary can work its way further down. So it's clipping the northern part of Maine right now. If it progresses a little bit further south, maybe we'll see some cooler temperatures, but this boundary really doesn't look significant enough to do anything else other than provide increased cloud cover and maybe some slightly cooler temperatures if it works a little bit further to the southwest. But as far as the models are concerned currently, it looks like it's held off here by the remnant effects of the blocking high and the incoming low. So for the better part, going through this weekend, we'll see moderate temperatures and really moderate wind speeds. Our average is going to be down between like 25 to 40 at best. So pretty calm conditions. And let's take a look at what's going on with our wind using the Windy app. So you can very clearly see the rotation around the high here, especially as it's sitting right off the southeast coast of us here. You could also see the reverse low-level jet that I was talking about here. You can see the remnant low effects down here, the high pressure up here, and this elevated wind speed, this channel of air that's blasting up into the mid-Atlantic and into the Great Lakes. And so this is that precipitation channel that we were talking about before. And make that go away. As we step forward, what we're going to see is this high descends and moves off. We do have elevated wind speeds that are coming down along with that cold air boundary that I was talking about a moment ago. So you can see in the northern parts and even into the central parts of Maine, we see slightly elevated wind speeds at the 850 millibar level. But back where we're at here and through most of this situation southwest of us, really calm, really moderate wind speeds. And that's pretty much going to be the case all the way through tomorrow and into Saturday as well. So it will be a factor of seeing how far that boundary pushes south to see if it boosts our winds. But so far what we're expecting is at most maybe 60 to 65 miles per hour over the next 48 hours or so. So really nothing terribly impressive for us, But as far as what's going on with the rest of the country, again, we're hoping that this precipitation ends quickly, especially for the Mid-Atlantic and the Great Lakes, and watching for severe weather to pop up in the South Central Plains and continued precipitation in the Northwest. So that's what's going on with our weather for the next 48 hours. If you guys are looking for more information, you can always head to our forecast discussion page, and we highly recommend that you go to mountwashington.org/classroom to see what's going on with our programming for the next couple of days. So as you can see, our schedule really hasn't changed, going down to where we're at here. So Tom gave an excellent presentation about different types of severe thunderstorms like squalls and derechos. And if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, make sure you do, and check out the worksheet as well as the game. The game with this one is also really cool. You get to make your own thunderstorm and create the conditions necessary to create really big thunderstorms, which is pretty cool. And then make sure that you guys tune in on Monday when we're going to talk about tornadoes, which is one of my favorite things to talk about here. We're going to talk about how tornadoes form, the different ratings from EF1 all the way to EF5, how we measure and study tornadoes, and really how we don't know very much about this particular weather phenomenon despite years and years of research. You could also go back and watch some of the previous videos if you missed them before, and there's plenty of good information down at the bottom of the page, so make sure you guys get a chance to check that out, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday. So at this point, we're going to turn it over. If you guys have any questions, we're going to go ahead and chat. And if you guys don't have any questions, you could always post in the comments after the fact, and I will be lingering around today. I will try to get to answering them as soon as I can. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. But again, it's looking, at least for up here in New England, it's looking to be a pretty moderate 48 hours and a pretty decent weekend, depending on what happens with that low as it moves up along the coast. So I don't believe we have any questions at this point. I'll go back and answer any that pop up in the chat later on. But thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully we see you on Monday at 11:15 for the tornado talk. And we really appreciate you guys checking it out. So thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.